And I'm really excited to be here with all of you and to be here with our guest facilitators. Welcome to the final Learning Institute of the program year. Um, I am Lily Cruz, and we want to know who you are as well. Some of the faces and names are very familiar, but if you can add your organization or your school or your role, it would be great to just know who's in the room. And why don't we go ahead and get started? So, as I shared, it's our final Learning Institute, and we are focusing on amplifying student voices, enhancing arts education assessment. And I am just so excited to be facilitating or really hosting the space because Lillian and MK will be doing most of the facilitation today. But I'm so excited to invite Lillian and MK from the CPS Department of Arts Education into the space to facilitate today. I actually, before I was at Ingenuity, I was at CPS Department or Office of Teaching and Learning, and I was on the Student Voice team. And when I was doing that work, the team that stood out and really like digging into student voice and arts education assessment and arts education instruction was the arts team. So a couple years later, it just really feels just like a treat to share space. And if you don't know me, my name is Lily Cruz. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Learning at Ingenuity. And I come into this space as um, a Chicago kid that engaged in a lot of arts education, including drama major at Lincoln Park High School back in the day. But also coming in as an educator, administrator, as a district partner, and also as a community member. And now I'm going to pass it to Lillian to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lilian Blaser. I am the manager of professional learning within the Department of Arts Education, which is also in the Office of Teaching and Learning at the district. A little bit about myself. I've been in the department for about 5 years now, probably exactly just 5 years and 1 month. Prior to that, I was a literacy and math instructional coach. Then for about 6 or 7 years, I was a visual arts teacher. And then way before that, for about 7 years, I worked in clinical neuropsychology, doing neuropsychological evaluations for clinical and some research patients. And I'm really excited to be here. My heart is in the arts as a pathway for transferable knowledge and skills that are relevant and the competencies that you acquire to be ready for the real world. So I'm really excited to be able to kind of share some of the things that we value as a district, how they connect to broader values, and to be able to engage in conversation with everyone. I want to pass things over to one of my colleagues, MK Victorson.
Thank you, Lillian. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is MK Victorson. I am the dance content specialist for the Chicago Public Schools Department of Arts Education professional learning team. So I work with Lillian closely, and I love doing this work, and I'm really happy to be here with you today. Thank you to Lily for having us. And I also come with a background of I've been in CPS for I think I'm on 16 or 17 years now. I was a classroom dance teacher and a drama teacher for a short period of time. And before that, I was a teaching artist with dance organizations and a dancer and choreographer. So I'm really happy to be here with all of you today and meet you and talk to you about what we are doing in professional learning around student voice and assessment. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you to the both of you. And also, welcome to folks that are just joining. We want to know who is in the room and how we can connect. So if you can add your affiliation, your organization, your school, that would be amazing. Any role. And just a few little housekeeping things. This session will be recorded and will be shared with folks. A lot of times we have folks sign up that know they can't attend, but um, are really interested in watching a video. So um, there's no need for anyone to have to record it. We'll make sure that we share it with everyone. And now I will go ahead and pass it back to Lillian and MK.
Thanks again, Lily. I can't see this screen share. Would you mind sharing the deck really quick? And then we'll jump into the session. I'm going to leverage the chat to drop in some links throughout our conversation. So look out for those, and I'll share with you when it's appropriate times to look at certain things. Here is our agenda for today. Because we're a smaller group, there's probably be a little bit more flexibility. We're going to jump into some framing and focus, then engage in an identity wheel opening activity to better understand ourselves, how we show up for the students that we serve, and ways that we can modify that opening activity within our organizations and our practice. Then MK will go through 3 different assessment strategies to leverage student voice in assessment. We'll share some resources, engage in a brief Q&A, and then wrap up with an exit slip and closing activity. On the next slide, you'll see the objectives for today. So take about a minute to read those. We're really excited to kind of model experientially in this virtual space ways to know and understand who your students are, how they make meaning of information, and how that can be leveraged to better understand the implications of what the learning environment looks like so we can make adjustments as needed. For our framing and focus today, we're focusing on student voice. And one of the priorities of the district is making sure that the daily learning experiences are equitable, rigorous, and joyful. And we know that that happens when students take ownership of their learning. There's more active engagement when they have choices, share their ideas, and they feel heard. CPS also has the instructional core vision. So that outside triangle, what's an apple right now, but the student teacher content is the instructional core. At the center of the core is the inner core that centers on identity, relationships, and community. And you'll see at the outside of the core is continuous learning. So continuing to know and understand new research, grounding research to help inform the instructional core, the inner core, to focus on the student experience and making sure that we're leveraging this research-based framework to show the interaction between content, teacher, and student, your knowledge and skills as a teacher, the content you put in front of your students, and the students' engagement in the learning process. As I mentioned, the inner core, we've added identity, so affirming and celebrating the identity of every child, relationships, where we're cultivating positive relationships between students and adults, and community. So not building not only a strong school and classroom communities, but uplifting communities from which our students come into our schools and classrooms. And this is kind of at the core, pun intended, of the work that we're doing in the district. For today, here's where we're talking about the links. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat. This will force you to make a copy of a Google document. This is optional, but could be utilitarian if you like to take notes through the process. So the content of the slides are reflected in this Google document. Whenever you see that orange icon, it'll be a reminder that there's a note catcher within this space. Let's give you about 30 seconds to click on that link, open that up if you'd like, and have it at a place where you feel comfortable using it if you choose to use it. All right. Practicing wait time is an area of growth for me, so I hope that was enough time. We're gonna go ahead and jump into the identity wheel. So we're going to, and Lily and MK, let me know what you think about this. I think we're a big enough or small enough group to probably just do this whole group. Does that feel okay? So we're gonna engage in a conversation to reflect on one or more of the questions that are listed on the next slide. You can use the planner as a note catcher. And the way that this was intended was to be small breakouts of two or three. So we can do that in this space. We'll start off with introductions. I know folks have introduced themselves in the chat. If you feel comfortable sharing that out loud, you'll introduce yourselves, your names, pronouns, if you'd like, and the organization, school, and content discipline that you teach. I can be the facilitator, and if I can ask Lily maybe to be the timekeeper, we'll spend about 2 or 3 minutes independently reflecting on those questions, and then we'll take turns sharing our reflections. I also want to note that you can share as much or as little as you want. So if you're comfortable sharing, you can just say pass or not participate if that feels more comfortable for you. Part of this is like the self-reflection, and if for those of you that feel comfortable sharing out loud, we can engage in that conversation. Any questions about the process so far? All right, great. So I'm going to or actually Lily, my timekeeper, will set the timer for about 2 or 3 minutes for just independent reflection, kind of responding to what part of your identity do you think your students first notice? What are you most or least comfortable sharing? And which part of your identity is the most important to you? All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you everyone for sharing. I hear a lot of vulnerability in what is being shared, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing like positivity in the interactions between the adult and the young learner as a result of that vulnerability, which is exciting to hear your experiences with that. I'd love to transition to like a whole group discussion, kind of think about the implications of something like this activity in the programming that you do, whether as a teaching artist or as an arts educator. How might this activity be adapted to be accessible to the young people that you serve? And then how can you leverage what you know about students to inform your assessment practices? So maybe we do like 90 seconds of think time, and then we can either unmute and share out loud, or you can drop notes in the chat. Give it 4 seconds. And again, feel free to just unmute or drop your thinking in the chat. Anyone like being the cold calling when you're in the classroom? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I can start off kind of just the conversation, like if that helps, and we can kind of like build on each other. The thing that I love about activities like this is they're agnostic of the content area, whether it's arts, non-arts, anything. So that's an exciting starting point for any of this, and I think there's like utility to use this at any time of the school year. If you're in the classroom, it could be anytime. As a visual arts teacher that saw like 1,000 kids a week, like it would be the first thing that I would do with my students at the very beginning of each time I saw new students. And it would help inform lots of things. And so I want to hear what informs for you, and then I can jump in with some of the things that it worked like for me. So I'd like to popcorn to anyone who would like to jump in. Catherine, would you be comfortable sharing a little bit? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I went with I guess I did work backwards, of like the leveraging, but I think I'm more interested in talking about the activities. So that's where I'll go. I thought right away, I was like, oh my goodness, this is such a like a lovely way of creating connections and connections to each other, deeper connection to themselves. There's something very powerful about being able to identify things and then share them with others. And so I was thinking for like my older grades, something that I think would be really fun to do with this would be something like, a brainstorming session with like post-its and colorful things and ways to, and having it around the classroom or around the space where they're able to add their little think about and then add their particular identities to things, or maybe even like a bingo card for themselves that they're filling in of things that makes sense for them. An auto drama came up to me of like bringing in an object, like maybe giving them time away from the classroom to think about what would be an object that would represent something that's impactful to them about their identity, their culture, their home life, whatever that might be, and coming in and being able to like share that in the group setting. So those were for like older grades, and then for the younger ones, I'm like something joyful, like that's me, where you read things and they get to like shake an egg shaker or jump up and down or um, cross the line if right, this is true for you, and celebrate together. That kind of joyful connection of these kind of games came up right away. So those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And everything that you shared could be done in any arts classroom, not just a theater class, which is really exciting. About these like facilitation practices that can help just like uncover who students are. I'm going to read what Anthony put in the chat, unless you want to unmute Anthony yourself. Okay, great, thanks.
Sure, yeah. I'm off camera a little because I'm snacking on my lunch. So I see in many of our classes, many of our teachers prepare these check-in questions in order to connect with their students at the beginning of class. Um, the questions vary every day in many different ways. Um, so it's really nice, and I see that the students really love to like justify their answers, and get really creative and learn from one another's answers as well about, why they would choose these different things. There's one particular student that I engage with too who loves to come into class and have, these big sweeping conversations about taxes and like social policies. And he's like in fourth or fifth grade. And I find myself always like really interested in, what students are talking to their families about at home. So I keep sort of stoking that conversation with trying to come up with creative questions of to learn why he believes these things or why he is so interested in talking about these things. Try to get his creativity going in more of just um in a like than a parrot mindset of just like repeating back information. So I find these opportunities really, really interesting for getting students to dig deeper into those identities as well, to not only see like maybe how they identify with like a broader group, but like how do they identify as an individual within that group. Um, yeah, and I like to leverage some of these opportunities. Or I believe I can leverage some of these opportunities to take moments for building bridges and giving leadership opportunities within the classroom. So if students feel heard by sharing earlier on in a class structure arc, then there's greater opportunity that they'll want to be more of a leader throughout the class because they feel listened to, and um, that's one way.
You're reading my facilitation notes. And like everything that has been shared so far, both in the chat and out loud, connects to what we talked about at the very beginning with the CPS instructional core, the inner core. I heard the conversation about like how identity informs the way we build relationships and how those relationships cultivate a safe community and how those communities feel joyful. And that's everything that we're working towards. And we're getting to like how this is utilitarian as assessment practice. What you know about your students, what they know and don't know, and how they make meaning of information is essential, is assessment. And unless there's any, if anyone wants one last comment, I'm going to pass things over to MK to kind of talk about the different discipline specific identity wheels we can elevate. Oh, Catherine said something in the chat. Game ideas, we probably know. That's me. Cross line if, spider web, this or that. Auto drama, bring in an item or a piece of music or text or visual that helps share some of how they identify. That's great. Thank you. I'm so excited that this session is also recorded too, so we can I don't want to steal it as ideas, like adapt those ideas in our practices. Yeah.
I was gonna share one more thing, and that was that like I remember the first time I saw an identity wheel as an adult. I was like, oh my gosh, like this has given language to things that I felt as a person, but didn't really know how to name. And I think the more that not only educator and students, like understand themselves, right? Like the better they can then share what they need through assessment. Like, because actually I am, I'm thinking back to like when I was in school, my syntax, actually, even as an adult, my syntax does not always, it's interesting. My syntax can be in Spanish while I'm using English words. And I think like knowing that when I was younger would have helped me like express myself and communicate like what I need in certain classes. So I also think it's a way to empower students to name what they need in assessment.
Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I'm going to pass things over to MK.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've been thinking about our personal identity, and thank you all for sharing some of your own personal story and how you share that with your students. It was really interesting and exciting to hear and hear about the possibilities for that. So we're going to get into artistic identity. We're going to talk about, we have this wonderful resource that one of our colleagues, our music specialist, Amanda, created. Or created with Lilian, I think, called our discipline specific identity wheels. So if you click into your planner, the link there should be in there for the identity wheels for the arts classrooms. There's one for visual arts, for dance, for theater, and for music. And we're going to take a look at those questions and respond to them in the planner too, and take some time to respond to them. So, and I have to move my my things around so I can see my slides. This is the dance example, which I love because it starts at the top with "Are you a dancer? Why or why not?" And I think each of the discipline wheels kind of starts with a question like that. Like, do you think of yourself as an artist? Do you think of yourself as a musician? So we're going to take a few minutes to just reflect in the planner. There's two or three questions. Three questions. Think about your programming and the arts discipline or disciplines that you teach. Write down any questions that stand out to you from the wheels that you're looking at. Could be from the discipline you teach, could be from a different one. And then add to that any additional questions that you would add to the wheel that you feel like are missing or that you like to add. And we're going to, I think, set a timer for some self-reflection, right, Lillian? For about Should we take about 5 minutes on this? Last time, 5 minutes? Okay. Any questions that stood out to you from any of the identity wheels? Would anyone like to unmute and share or share in the chat? I can share that for me when I read the who in your family dances and how. Um, I am kind of the primary dancer in my family, but that question takes me back to remote teaching during the school shutdown and the COVID pandemic. And I did so much remote teaching and making of videos that I had to, I didn't have to, but I involved my children in them a lot. So the children who live in my house with me, um, sometimes through bribery and a little extra allowance, but I had them create videos and be my assistants in a lot of the dance warm-ups and videos that I made for my students. So it was kind of it lives on as a nice memory of us dancing together when they were a little bit younger. Thanks.
I appreciated on these identity wheels, yeah, that kind of like a question for me that has to do with how you identify when looking at music or looking at dance or looking at theater, being like, do I even consider myself a musician? Do I tell stories, right? These kind of questions, whether or not they were meant to be like the first thing my eye went to, it was right in the center. And so I think that's a really evocative question to ask from the beginning, is being like, regardless as to what I know about this or how long I've been doing it, do I at least think I am? Which is a very empowering question for anyone, no matter what age. But I especially feel like when there's that kind of question coming to our learners, it's like, yes or no. And if no, then being able to slide around about being like, well, does anyone dance in your family? Or, can you make sounds with your body? I liked those kind of questions that kind of slid around. So I appreciated that starting.
Yeah, they help you to open up your definition of your art form, right? So many of my students were like, I don't dance, I don't do that, that's not my thing. Um, and then we talked about where we see movement in the world, in our families, in our neighborhoods, and it really opened that up. And I think it's an interesting question, as you said, Catherine, for us as educators to ask ourselves too. Like, are we artists? Isn't that what we're doing here? And how do we identify as artists? As we look at these, did anyone have a question that they wanted to add to the wheel that's missing that they wrote down? Would anyone like to share those out loud or in the chat?
I would be willing to. I'm sorry if I keep going first. Please interrupt me if someone else says. I wrote down a few. Not because I didn't think that the wheels were really well rounded, because I did, but because I had these questions for myself. I was like, if I was, back being a learner as a developing mind, like what would be something that would maybe get me to think about that? And one of the things I thought about was I don't even know how to word it, but it's something along the lines of like, how do, how much tolerance or how do you feel about being cringe? um, was something that came up to me on the theater side of things. Because so often it's like, it is kind of cringy, it's crunchy, it's awkward, it's weird, it's silly, it's goofy, right? And so having them already start to think about like, what is my tolerance level, or what is my like, do I do that? Am I okay with that? Which led me to being like, with the voice being like, do I have something that I want? Does my voice, do you believe that your voice deserves being heard? Or do you ever feel like you have something important to say? Or something along those lines of like, do you like using your imagination? Um, does being in front of people freak you out? I don't know. Like these kind of questions did also come up to me, which I think that wheel that started at the top that had to do with like, how do you like to learn? How do you know when you're angry? That would probably kind of cover a little bit of that centering in the learning. But yeah, the thing about cringe and about imagination were two things I thought of.
I love cringe. I love getting into the things that as teachers, teaching artists are going to come up, right? Are going to be things that that just come up when you're doing improvisation, when you're in a seventh grade dance class, cringe comes up a lot. That's a topic. So that's a great question to get them talking about and sort of breaking down some nerves they might have around doing the work. I see in the chat, Jaleesa added, how do you think art tells stories? Which is wonderful. That's a great question to talk about in your classrooms. And Anthony added, a question I would add is, are your favorite parts of performing and singing? Also a great one. Yeah, getting at what you love about doing the work. And Anthony says, inspired by Catherine, do you ever use self-speak or talk to yourself to process through a challenge or develop a character? Yeah, that's great.
These
Wonderful.
these are such great questions. The one thing that I wonder about some of the binary questions is like, how can you tweak them to be more open-ended? So instead of do you ever, in what ways do you use self-speak to so that you're soliciting like a deeper response to push kind of their vulnerability a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. So these are our identity resources, which are in the deck and are linked in your planner. So you can look around in these and add more things to them after today. And please let us know what you do with them too and what other kinds of amazing ideas you come up with. Um, I think we're going to move on. Thanks.
I'll just jump in really quick. And this was like one of my favorite things that I saw. So take a minute to take 30 seconds to read it. And I see the clapping. So thank you for that. That's so like as we kind of think about getting to know our students, how they're doing, the identity wheel is an activity that's actually a form of assessment. It's an opportunity to collect information or evidence about who your students are, where they're at, and it can help inform how and what you teach, and then subsequently create the learning environment and experiences that are reflective of their identities and their lived experiences, and making the learning feel more accessible because it's being responsive. This quote just it made me happy when I saw it, so I took a screenshot and like dropped it in. So it was really exciting to see. But it also shows the importance of knowing who we teach and how that helps us become better educators that honor the identities and assets of our students. And like simply put, like it helps us, it informs how we pivot and are responsive to the students that are in front of us. And so taking that time is essential. So thank you all for engaging in that activity. I'm really excited to pass it back to MK to walk us through a couple of assessment strategies. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lillian. So I wanted to take you through a few engagement and assessment strategies that I used a lot in the classroom and that I continue to use with teachers that I love. They're all movement based because that's my background. And but I also think that there's applications to all content areas from them. So after we engage in them, we'll talk about how you would apply them to your own environment and your own content area. Because I do want to hear that from you because I love to see the cross content connections. But they are all in dance education. We call them embodied activities. So I will ask you to participate and join in embodying in these activities to your comfort level. And I might do some of them with you. So the first one is one I love to do for giving students some choices in how they get to respond and create. I created it as a connection between movement and visual art. This is called Dance Along, and it also allows me to it's a great little ongoing formative assessment that I can do with my students where I'm giving them visuals to respond to, and I can kind of check in with how they're doing with that, what kind of information they're picking up from the content, and maybe even their comfort level in responding and other things as well. So I'm going to ask you about that at the end, but we're going to do this right now. So if you are comfortable, I am going to invite you to join us. What we're going to do is we're going to look at a slideshow. I'm going to try to play music in the background. I don't know how well that part's going to go, but I'm going to try. And as the slides advance, the direction I have for you is to embody the images. So copy them, interpret them as you are comfortable doing. You can be seated, you can be standing. If you really want to keep your camera off, you can experience the activity that way. And so Lily will just kind of keep advancing the slides. We'll give them like, I don't know, 3, 4 seconds and then advance. Should we try that? Okay. So here goes. And these are all images from the Art Institute. We're going to stay on the wave image here for a minute. If we can go back to that slide of the wave. So go ahead and you can go back to the last shape or movement you were making. And I'm just going to give you some prompts as you're in that space. So what I like to do with at least one of these still images, and I notice some of you are moving in response, which I love, is to give my students some prompts. So I might say, how can you make this particular shape or this image that you see on the screen move around in the space you're in, even if it's a small space? And what parts of your body want to move? I see heads and necks moving. I see a lot of movement of the spine, the hands. Do you see somebody else moving in your movement space whose move you want to copy? Do you want to steal a dance? That's what I call it. Do you want to steal somebody's dance? You can try that, yeah. Can you take that dance that you're doing or that you've stolen and can you move it higher in the space? Can you move it way down low in the space? What does that feel like? If you want to, of course. And since we're on camera, sometimes it's just fun to play with what you can do in the camera space. Yeah, I see some hands. I see an elbow, a head. That's so fun. Thank you, dancers. You can relax for a minute. Thank you so much. So that is dance along. Um, I do love that as an assessment and as also a way to bring out student voice. And as you saw, I think if you were watching what was happening on the screens, we saw a lot of different interpretations, right, of those images, a lot of different ways you and your students could embody those images. So, what can this, what would this look like, or what could this look like in the discipline or the environment that you teach in every day? What kind of things are coming up? You can unmute or write in the chat.
I think that this, when it comes to theater, they're also engaged. I could see like literally using this awesome thing with the visual into like the movement, into maybe what does the movement inform words, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
musicality. How can we take this movement if this is this person doing that wave and this person doing that wave, and then we add it on a grid and they what do they say then? What kind of sounds? So I could
Mm-hmm.
see it morphing into like being great fodder for devising new work.
Yes. And when oh, I see Anthony wrote a slideshow of characters, animated, real, and how having students mirror expressions, an additional prompt of how different expressions or images makes them feel. Yeah, once you start to really work with images and encourage your students to kind of play around with them, then I think you're all feeling like as the teacher, the facilitator, the prompts kind of come to you, you know? And I didn't think about it ahead of time, but I was like, oh yeah, we're in the camera space, so it's cool to see like how we can what kind of fun we can have with that because it's not our real in-person space. It's different. And so how does that change up how we move and how we respond to each other? And speaking of assessment, what does something like this dance along slideshow, what kind of information does this give you about your students? What does it tell you about them?
Again, I feel like it's a wonderful assessment for being like a spectrum of mobility,
Mhm.
of being like how are they naturally adapting this for what they feel really confident doing. And then what are ways that we could maybe stretch in the coming week, stretch into that. And I think dance is a wonderful, I think anytime I've worked with dancing educators, I'm like, wow, the assessment is lovely because of these kind of exercises that are that way. But I also agree that even if it morphs into like speaking or non-speaking work in the theater space, you're still assessing the comfort levels. You're still assessing the strength-based skills that they're naturally doing so that you can perhaps also see what they're interested in, the direction they're going, and how you can encourage and invite growth in that area from what you saw on day one or like when we did this activity.
Yeah. Thank you, Catherine.
I don't know if this is okay. One of my favorite things to do when I was teaching visual arts, and doing perspective drawing with my students was get them out in the hallway and like move their body to see space. And so I identified three students. One was really close to us, one was kind of like in the middle, one was far away. Um, and we took our hands and we what traced the bottom of the locker next to us to the end of the hallway. We traced the horizon line. Then we measured the first person that was furthest away, in the middle, and then closest to understand how we see that three-dimensional space in a two-dimensional way, to be able to understand how three-dimensional space translates itself in a two-dimensional drawing. And just that act of, well, it was like just like very small small gestures, that act of movement helped them encode the information in a different way to translate what was the actual reality versus what they thought things should look like. So I was able to help like clarify the misperceptions and be able to see how movement helped inform understanding of space in a two-dimensional way.
That's a great idea. And I know I shared with Lillian and Lily that with this slideshow, I purposely picked images of figures, and then it gets more abstract as the slides go on, just to kind of see. And I think that's a fun thing to play with too. And what would it be like if you started abstract and went to figures? If you add multiple figures, there's a lot of ways to play with it. I'm going to move us along unless anyone else wanted to add something about that last one. But we're going to kind of stay with all of that content we just took in from those slides. And we're going to do a short little kind of choreography exercise, choreography from improvisation. So I have here one of our Illinois Arts Learning Standards. It's a kindergarten creating standard. And it asks students to improvise dance with beginning, middle, and end. So we're going to kind of create a short beginning, middle, and end. So think about three shapes or three movements or three movement moments that you just created, experienced, and if you can't conjure them exactly, that's okay. Just think about three movements, three shapes, and we're going to put them together in a beginning, middle, end sequence. So if you want to turn your camera off for a minute to work on that, and then we're going to put it aside just for like a few more minutes and come back to it in a few, if that makes sense. So you're just taking three things you did, put them together into some kind of beginning, middle, end, and hold on to that information. So go ahead and turn your camera off if you feel like it. Take a minute. We'll come back in a minute. Awesome. We will have a moment to share those if you'd like to in just a few minutes, but I'm going to take you through a few other assessment and student voice strategies we use first, and or one more, and then we'll come back to our phrases in a minute. So this next one is feedback prompts. And this is something that we were working on in the Department of Arts last year. We were working on talking about meaningful feedback, giving our students meaningful feedback for growth, and the practice of us as educators giving meaningful feedback and also encouraging our students to give meaningful feedback to each other. So we started playing around with how to prompt our students. And I created a set of cards, and the cards are linked here in the deck. And I believe they're linked in our planner, right, Lillian? Yes. So they're on your planner if you want to take a look. And I started with the three that I use all the time, which are I notice, I wonder, and I like, because in the dance classroom at the very basic, I wanted my students to notice and use their dance vocabulary. Did they see levels? Did they see traveling movement? Did they see different directions? I wanted them to ask questions of the other dancers and choreographers. And I also wanted them to be in the practice of giving compliments and really naming the things that they liked. I love teachers too. Um, so and also I shared that a lot of my students, and in talking to teachers, we had a common challenge that would come up where I might have my students work on a dance and they'd show what they'd been working on. And the common feedback they gave each other was, it was cool, I liked it, and um, you did it wrong, or something to that effect, or that didn't look very good. But that wasn't enough, obviously, to really give feedback to say, okay, here's something you could work on, or here's something I thought of, or here's something I was wondering about. Um, and it's great to hear that your work is cool, but you want to know why. And I know that when I would go and see my son perform with his high school choir, I would say, "Oh my gosh, you were so great. You did a wonderful job." And he would say, "Thank you, Mom. What was great about it? Tell me." So, so I was thinking of kind of those two instances in creating feedback, and we put together these cards. And on the next slide here, you'll see they get a little bit more detailed. So we go from I notice, I wonder, I like. Oh, did I miss one? To, I think I missed the last slide. Oh, yeah. Okay. There we go. To things like, I see how this shows your strength in going forward, consider, and this might take your skills to the next level. What would happen if you consider experimenting with, you do this very well? And there's even more of these. They are our DAE feedback cards are a little bit dance focused, but there's a lot of places you can take them. So we're going to go back to the original set, the I notice, I wonder, I like, and we're going to go back and we're going to practice this. We're going to revisit your phrase that you made. Remember your little, yes. So I think the slide after this, and then the one after it. Yes, this is it. Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. So you have your little combination that you made, your beginning, middle, end, to begin working on improvisation and choreography. And I would like us to practice using this feedback. We can put it in the chat, but I would like for everyone who observes a dance to write at least one, I notice, I wonder, I like feedback. And if you have something more extensive, I saw you do this and it meant a lot when anything you want to say based on those feedback cards, go for it. Thank you. Thank you, dancer performers. Thank you. And what I would usually say to my students is, okay, if we had post-it notes or if we were in the chat, I'd say, put your love notes in the chat. We call them love notes. We do. So I notice, I wonder, I like. And I see so far, Lillian says, MK, I liked how you moved your body from one side to the other. Thank you. Shamar, I noticed you started small and got bigger. Catherine, I noticed you used just hands in the frame, in the camera frame. That was a really interesting choice. And then I see Anthony says, Shamar, I love how you were moving on a horizontal plane, side to side, and then expanded beyond the frame. Yeah. Lillian says, Catherine, I noticed you started close to the camera and then pulled back and moved across the screen. And Lynn says, I noticed that MK bent her body like a flower. I wonder if Catherine was thinking about spiders. So some of us are really just like imagining things and getting some pictures, right? Love it. I noticed, MK, you were able to make a strong, still tree-like pose. Ah, thank you. So yeah, and so when I was remote teaching, I would tell my students, go back and read what people said about you. If we were in the classroom, we would share this, maybe one-on-one, maybe group to group, and we would practice going through these cards. And I have one more down here, which says, Catherine says, Shamar, I wish I had been able to take in your movement, but I was busy. LOL. That's okay. That's okay. So this is great. And you can see we're starting with I notice, I wonder, and I like, but already it's more meaningful, right? And for you as a performer, what does that feel like for you to read the comments that people gave you?
It helps clarify um, things that were maybe images in my mind, but that told a story in somebody else's, and so that was really helpful.
Mm, yes.
I think it's also nice to hear the different narratives and stories that you can come up with that others resonate with or may have a different interpretation.
Yeah, and I think about that for all your different disciplines that you're all teaching too, right? A lot of ways we can cross over the content and think about where storytelling comes in, where images come in, and how we interpret what we see on the stage. So that's just it's a really brief feedback protocol, but I see Anthony wrote this made me think of a way for early childhood students to use their bodies to spell their name with their body, which has a beginning, middle, and end with letters. Yeah, I love that standard that it gets at you're making something, it starts and it ends, and something's happening in the middle of it. And it really goes with literacy, right? It goes with everything we're teaching students about. What's a sentence? What's a story? How does it begin and end? So that's wonderful feedback. I just wanted to share with you too what I really like to have stuff as a teacher, and so what I did with these cards, yeah, and it's adaptable for virtual lessons. Lillian says she loves the standards. I put them into cards like on a sight word ring, so that teachers can have them flip through them, give them to their students, and they can practice using them one-on-one, smaller, larger groups, but they can really get in the practice and model it for students too. So that is that feedback protocol. Any other thoughts on how you would use this with the students you see or something like this?
It's really helpful with my private voice studio for students to be able to assess one another with voice. It's objective, but it's very subjective also because it's dependent on the individual's sensations that each person feels, and each person identifies those with different vernacular. So it's very helpful for high school students to be able to share how they identify a particular sensation and to learn observationally.
That's wonderful. I love hearing that. I love hearing about applications for high school and for voice too. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. I think I got everything that was in the chat. We are going to,
One thing can I quickly
yes,
mention
please.
that I love, Anthony, about like I'm just gonna build on what you just said. When we observe classrooms, we want to see the students having agency over the learning experience. And so when students give each other feedback, they're able to interdependently leverage the way that each other is making meaning of information to help deepen their learning. And that's kind of our desired outcome. Like an exemplary classroom is a student-led classroom, and modeling these feedback strategies, having them deeply know and understand what like the learning target is, helps them helps to cultivate that community where students have that agency within their classroom. So I just want to kind of like add on, Anthony, what you just said about like the student to student. That's like such a huge important pillar in terms of how students make meaning of things collaboratively and interdependently.
Thank you, Lillian. Yeah, again, this is another place where you can build and model this skill of giving meaningful feedback for your students, but they do have agency in it. They do have a voice in it, and you learn something about them, right, as you go through this process. So we have one more assessment strategy we wanted to show you. I'm really passionate about this one, and it is a movement-based strategy. It's a little harder to show in the virtual space, so we're going to move a little bit, and then we're going to talk through what would happen with this in the classroom space. So this is something I call movement lab or lab partners. I'm often fond of taking the sort of educational terms you might hear in another content area like science and putting them in dance. So I called it lab partners, because it's the same kind of thing. You get together, you're working on a problem with a partner, and you're working it out together without the teacher, on top of all 32 students in the class at once. There's some student agency, and you get to help each other out and build that skill as well. So this encourages student agency and whole group learning. Students get to share their ideas and feel heard by their classmates. And this is another place where you can monitor with frequent checks for understanding of material. So this is something I used a lot when I was teaching unison dance, something everyone needed to know. And I think you can use it in other areas too, but kind of put yourself in that place of, okay, we're all learning the same thing. Everybody's working at the same time on the same thing. So I'm going to teach you a short little movement phrase. And again, you have choices for how you want to take in this information. You can do it standing up, you can be sitting down, you can turn your camera off if you would prefer. But I'm going to demonstrate a really simple phrase to you, and we'll just learn it together. If for any reason you don't pick it up right away, that's great, because we'll talk about what the next steps would be, but I think you will. Okay, so I've got a short movement phrase to teach you, and I'm going to say the words that go with it, and I'll demonstrate it, and you can do it with me. So it goes up, down, shake side, wiggle, 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 shape. And that last shape is yes, anything you want to. Yeah, be creative. Love it, love it. Okay, so let's do it again. We go up, down, shake side, wiggle, 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 shape. Amazing. These shapes, oh my gosh, so creative. Okay, I'm just gonna say it now, and you're gonna show it to me. Ready, set, here we go. Up, down, shake side, wiggle, 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 shape. Let me just see these shapes. I see a leg shape. I see arms overhead. I see arms to the side. I see elbows crossing. I see hands in the frame. Amazing. Relax. So, with lab partners, anytime I'm teaching a group the whole thing, a unison phrase, and I really like to think back to when I had 32 second graders or 32 seventh graders. I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you've had a giant class and there's just one you in front of them. The way I could get around to check in with them was that I couldn't. It was really hard. So I thought, I got to start pairing them up with each other. So what I would do at this point is say, okay, find a partner. Sometimes I would be a little bit more deliberate with them. I might have already assigned their partners based on what I knew about them already, but I'd have them get together with their partner. Maybe it's a trio at most. And in this small partnership or trio, they would then take that information I just gave them, the combo, and they practice it together so they get better at it. They help each other, they ask each other questions. They say things like, wait, what comes after this? What should I do for the shape? Should it be different from you? Should it be the same? And they get together and they kind of problem solve that little bit of movement information that I've given them. So that's lab partners. So now that you've experienced it and you kind of know what happens in the part two, which is really the assessment piece, what I want to ask you is two things. What did you learn about yourself in that short little student moment, learning that dance? Let's start with that. What did you learn about yourself, about how you learn, about how you learned in that moment?
That if I combined like a word, like if I was listening and saying it with you, like the up, down, shake, shake, right? That
Hmm.
was helping my brain make these connections. So that was cool.
Oh, that's great. That's great information for me as a teacher to have too. Lynn says, I could learn a phrase quickly. Yep. And you did. You learned it quickly.
I like marking is what I call it. I don't know if they use that term in dance the
Hmm.
same way, but I don't necessarily do the moves really big or at like a performance level at first. That helps my brain.
That's good. Yeah, that's two comments I've heard from people who are like, this is what helps me to learn. I love hearing that. It's really interesting, um, just info for me to gather, right? As your teacher in this tiny little moment. So thinking about that, and I already said a few things, but what do you learn about your students by doing something like this and then having them get into lab partners to work on it further?
I think you can learn about like how the activity made them feel or what they discovered about themselves, which is really cool and ties back into like identity, you know? So that's one. And then the second thing I think is like it also helps, probably would help me to learn like what was how were my steps helpful, or how was the structure, the scaffolding, was did it did it was there enough time for that before they went into pairs, and then once they were in pairs, um, did they have enough time to process and problem solve and find each other? So those are the two things I thought that I
Yeah.
learned.
When you are teaching in a school or even as a residency teacher, right? You have so many different groups of students at one time, and you often see them in short bursts. So you're not going to necessarily see your fourth graders all 5 days this week and then next week. You're going to see them maybe once a week. So this is really a great way to kind of get that information from them. And you know, when you go back next week, maybe I need to slow down a little bit, or maybe I need to put them in partners sooner, or maybe I need to put them in partners later. It helps you to kind of make those choices, right? Anthony, did you want to share what you have in the chat here?
Yeah, so it really relates to singing a lot, but in any regard, this sort of goes back to like identity or like individual voice in the classroom. So if a student uses a particular analogy or a term or a word metaphor for how they were learning best or how they felt during a particular activity, trying to remember that phrase or term or image as the teacher to bring back, since that I believe that however the student is expressing that they were learning quickest is going to be the most optimal way to re-access that learning avenue for them in the future, since it's the most potent metaphor for them.
Yeah, that's very well said. All of your students are going to learn differently, right? So when they can give you that information back of, oh, it helps me to say the words, or it really helps me to get together with a partner sooner rather than later, or it helps me to just mark it first and then do it full out. All of that is stuff that's telling you something about them that you can think about for the next time you approach teaching unison work or whatever it might be. And we have connected questions on page 3 of the planner. Are these the same questions, Lillian? I'm sorry, I don't have the planner open right now.
The ones that we had for the identity wheels, so like kind of the
Ah,
thinking about the
yes.
different learning styles and how that helps inform assessment strategies.
Yes. And this, I think this kind of came up for me too, because I realized that when I taught something like I'm teaching the whole group, it's just me, I'm teaching the whole group this one thing, and there's not a lot of like different avenues for expression in it. How do I make it interesting to them and keep them interested in wanting to do well at it and help each other out with it? Um, so that there is a place for their identity to live, even in doing something like unison, we're all doing the same thing. So thank you for bringing us back to that. Um, I think we're going to move on to our resources. Thank you everyone for dancing and moving with me. I really appreciate you. And thank you for all of your comments and questions in the chat and out loud.
Thank you, MK, for your genius and your facilitation. I don't know if I've told you guys yet in the session, but I am really lucky that MK is on my team. So I'm excited that you guys got to experience her genius. So I'm going to kind of walk through a couple of quick resources before we jump into a Q&A. This is a lot of words on a page. So on the next slide, this is in a document, but we want to just share some practices for elevating student voice. These are specifically for elevating student voice, but as you engaged in our learning today, you saw how elevating student voice, knowing who they are ways to understand how you can assess them. So there are connections there. On the next slide, we have a bunch of resources. I know I put in the chat like what bolded words are on standards and underlined words in standards are. I do love standards. So on this slide, that first link is our departmental unit plan template. If you want to unpack standards with me, please let me know. I would love to. But they help inform how we backwards plan our learning experience. So we're trying to achieve the desired outcome of that standard and to maintain that rigor of the standard. What you'll notice when you do look at that, you'll have to make a copy. I think it's just a view only link, so you can make a copy of the template. There are multiple worksheets inside of those. So if you look at stage 2, I have, I think, 3 or 4 different assessment worksheets, one about pre-assessments, one about formative assessments, one about how to write a performance task, and one about how to write a summative assessment. So that first link has multiple links in it if you want to leverage that as a way to do standards aligned units and lessons in your programming. The second link is the Illinois Arts Learning Standards. Those are what we use across all artistic disciplines in the district. If you use the national ones, that's okay. They're very similar, but we like to encourage people to use the Illinois ones as much as possible. And then I'm going to skip through a couple of them. The other thing that I want to bring your attention to is the CPS Learning Conditions Guide and the PERTS Learning Conditions Guide. And so those will give some practices, some principles and practices around student voice and other learning conditions within the classroom. And then we have at the very bottom some of the things that we shared in our session today. And the very last link is the Arts Partner Standards of Practice as well. All right, that's a bunch of resources. These are on the last page of your planner. So if you need the planner again, I'll just put it in the chat one more time, just in case anyone wants an extra copy of it. So it has all the guiding questions and the resources in here. All right, thank you all so much.
Awesome. I just want to have all of us in whatever way, whether it's dance or words or emotions, just share so much gratitude for MK and Lilian. Thank you both so much for sharing just a plethora of amazing resources that can be used with students, for bringing just the passion and the joy around the work, and really like being with us as colleagues and peers, but also like pushing us to try things that are new and be in our own learning. And yeah, apologies earlier. I was a little like, whoa, what's happening? Because I get really into my learning. I was here with y'all. And then when I quickly checked my email, it looks like a couple folks had technical issues getting in. That's one of the reasons that we record so we can get it to folks. So we will be doing that. They definitely missed a great session, but hopefully there'll be more in the future. So we have about 5-ish minutes here, although this is not the only time that we have to connect with MK and Lilian. They share their info in this deck, which we'll also share in an email to folks. But yeah, just want to open it up. Any questions that are bubbling up for folks that they want to share either in the chat or out loud?
Yeah, one question for the ongoing these ongoing sessions. I know this is, I think, the last in this way for this topic for the school year, but for honorarium, for teaching artists and people that are attending, is there a set number of honorarium per session, or so that I can communicate with our roster of teaching artists, and levy those expectations for if it's first come, first serve. How can I communicate that most accurately to our teaching artists?
Yeah, we definitely have a limited budget around honorarium, so we say that folks should apply. And then we kind of base it on how many folks applied, how much is left in the budget based on, the entire program year. So those are numbers that we have to go back and crunch with our operations folks. I am kind of, we have the community of practice, so we have a couple of more events, and hopefully we are able to give everyone an honorarium. But I do feel pretty confident that in this space, the Learning Institute space, that that's not an issue for folks that are here.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I think, in the future, we're working on our budget. We're providing that for future as well. I think what I'm picking up on is like clear communication around expectations would be helpful next
Yeah, if I'm able to
year.
guarantee some sort of, or if I need to say that one should apply and they will hear back if it is available. I think that's what I'm hearing is the more appropriate means of communication.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful for folks. So thank you for that question and also for that feedback for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. And thanks for providing the honor. That's so helpful for our teaching artists.
Yeah, it's really important for us to be able to offer it.
I have a question since we have you here. Um, what's your favorite activity or game that you like that's like high value for you as an educator or the teacher that you remember from the past or that you just stumbled upon currently that has really revitalized or excited you? I'm always looking for.
I think MK and I both love books, children's books specifically. I worked in multiple different school environments, and I think the first thing that I learned is like growth mindset is really important. Um, when young people enter your classroom and have this perception that they're not good. And so I love the author Peter H. Reynolds. And so I would read Ish on the first day of class. And for my younger ones, actually, I think I did it for most of my elementary grades. We would do the dot at some point, early on. But like leaning into like how, like making a mark, seeing where it goes, and how good is ish. And as long as you're experiencing joy and trying, like you can create art that is ish. And then dot, like making a dot and seeing where it goes. And so kind of like the affirmation from the teacher in the book, that dot that I think Vashti is the name of the character in the book makes is she signs her name on it and it becomes a gallery. It becomes a piece of art in a gallery. So we're just kind of thinking about like entry points to arts making, and how we can kind of shift our mindset to know that we're all artists in whichever artistic discipline that we're in.
Yeah, we do love books so much, picture books, and we use them all the time. Um, so yes to that. My latest favorite is um the poems. It's called Out of Wonder, and it's a poetry anthology that Kwame Alexander put together with poets who are sort of reimagining famous poets. Like there's a reimagined Gwendolyn Brooks, and there's a reimagined Langston Hughes, and there's a Pablo Neruda, and all these wonderful poems in their style. And it's written for kids. and it's beautifully illustrated. So I love that one. I'll write it in the chat. It's called Out of Wonder. And I wanted to share too, um, that my go-to activity, and Lillian knows this, and it's hard to do in this space, but you can probably guess I love shapes as an entry point for dance and movement. And if you for Catherine and others who come from the theater space, the when you play Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo and then you're like Charlie's Angels and elephants and you make those quick tableaus. So I took that and I have a whole Chicago series that I do. So I'm like, okay, 10 seconds, Sears Tower, Bean, Picasso, Art Institute. So I use a lot of variations on that. And I have a lot of Chicago images that I carry around with me of famous landmarks and the river and public art. So that's like that. Yeah, I do that one a lot because and we start like single person shape and then duet shape and then giant group. Um, and I just keep kind of making permutations of it, but I'd love to do it with the Chicago theme. So that's one of my things I'm passionate about in as an activity.
That's so fun. I literally was doing Bibbidi Bibbidi Bop this morning with some fourth graders in Humboldt Park area. So that would be fun to take that to them. And it also made me think, like what you were saying about shape, about even being like, make an make an oval, right? For like the kindergartners, because they love those like the square, the rectangle, the star, you know. So I love that. Thank you, MK, and thank you, Lillian. That was great.
Yes. They just keep going with all the good stuff. And they're not even done, actually. There's a closing activity too. But before the closing activity, your feedback, right? Just like the little mini conversation about the honorarium, like all of that really, really matters to how we create this space, hold this space, what we're talking about, who we want to make sure is like at the table, brought to the table, included. So, would love to give folks 5 minutes right now to access the exit slip. It's about a 5 minute survey. And definitely, I think it's hard when it's after. I know it is for me sometimes, like I mean well, but I might forget or, move on to something else. So why not actually take some time right now to have folks complete it? So passing it back to Lillian for our closing.
Thank you, Lily, and thank you all again. I hope you felt like an experiential opportunity that could be replicated in the way that you teach. And so one of our goals is to make sure that we're facilitating professional learning that can be adapted into the setting that you're engaging in. So here's one last activity that you can leverage in your spaces to elevate student voice and gather information that will help inform your instructional practices. And so you can pick one, two, or all three to reflect on something that you're excited to try as it relates to leveraging student voice in the arts classroom, something that squares or aligns with what you're already doing, or something that's circling around your brain as an opportunity for student voice and arts assessment. I'll give about maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes of think time. And if anyone would like to share out loud or in the chat, we'll take anything that you're interested in sharing. And in the meantime, I'm going to drop my contact information and MK's contact information into the chat so that you have quick copy and paste access to that. take about 10 more seconds to wrap up your thinking. I hope it's not distracting for me to share a suggestion, but this could be done as like an exit slip on a sheet of paper. It could be done orally like we're kind of doing right now. And you can kind of give students choice in terms of the way that they respond or engage in it as well. I'd love to hear any reflections that anyone would like to share.
I would like to try out the identity wheels on one of my summer camps, see how that goes. And then I would like to something that is squares or aligns with what I'm doing is I love finding new ways of asking or framing feedback for students and for myself. And establishing that in the visuals is a wonderful way to be inclusive. So I think that's going to be has been a lovely thing. And then circling around my brain, I love that question. What did you learn about yourself today or during this activity? And maybe having that be a thing in duets, of sharing, and then maybe in the larger groups. So those are my things.
Thanks, Catherine. Like one more? Would anyone like to drop anything into the chat? Perfect, thank you. So we have responses from Anthony and Lynn. Try rings with assessment prompts, squares, asking students to get more specific about what they observe, circle, discovering what topics or subjects in the real world can be integrated into the class. And then Lynn says, I also love the question, what did you learn about yourself today? Never used that before. Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for your engagement today. It's been such a joyful experience. And again, I'm going to share my gratitude for MK as a genius on my team. And thank you, Lily, for inviting us to be able to engage in this way. And thank you all for your thoughtfulness, your participation, and your excitement about this process. We're really lucky to be able to share this space with you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you again, MK and Lillian, and thank you all as well. Have a safe and actually a nice long weekend, hopefully, where you get a little bit of extra time to relax and have a safe rest of day. And we hope to see you at the Community of Practice, where we will be in person in collaboration with Arts Ed Shy, and we will continue this conversation.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Lily.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.